So you might be familiar with Singapore math, which is very common in the elementary school stage in America. This is a Singapore math book, from a traditional American sort of setup. It's called the US edition. So it's the Singapore Math 4A, 4B. This is the textbook and the workbook series. But then there's also the Singapore, actual country of Singapore. This is what they use in Singapore. And what you realize is that the 4A and 4B used in Singapore match what we use in America. No problem there. We have the kindergarten or pre-K to 6th grade, basically for Singapore math that Americans are familiar with. But have you ever wondered about the 7th grade and up for Singapore math books? Well, I want to talk to you briefly about what's different. In Singapore, when you get to 7th grade all the way to 10th grade, that's basically a set of, like high school years. After 10th grade, it's different from what happens in America. And that's part of why I believe we don't see as much of their textbooks after 6th grade, because our education systems are different. But here's the cool thing. In Singapore, this is what their 10th graders do. I have the books that their 10th graders use. And here's what's interesting. Singapore and Nigeria use a similar system, which is closer to a British system. And if you've ever looked at the rankings of top mathematicians in the world, you notice that Great Britain has produced a lot of those top mathematicians. So there's something about the system that the British system uses for math that seems to be quite effective. And Singapore uses a model that is kind of similar. And here's what they do. In 10th grade, you have a regular math course. This is their regular math course for 10th grade. Let me read the table of contents to you. They have set and set notation. So basically they have some key, that's a key element of mathematics and learning, set and set notation. They have probability of combined events. They have statistical data analysis, and then they have matrices. So that's in their first book here for 10th grade. In the second book for 10th grade, they have the following topics. They have some geometry, they have some vectors. Then they have numbers and algebra, geometry and measurements, and then probability and statistics. So notice that there's some algebra, there's some geometry, there's some vector stuff, there's some set notation. So there's a little bit of different variety within 10th grade in just the traditional math 10th grade course in Singapore. But here's why Singapore is way better than America and many other countries in that K-12 space. Well, way better than America. Let's just talk about that, because America is really the country that is behind when it comes to K-12 math excellence. Singapore, Nigeria, India, a lot of these countries follow what I'm about to say. You take the regular 10th grade, and even within just the regular 10th grade, there's a mixture of different branches of mathematics that you're learning in that 10th grade. So your brain is able to work through all of that. In Nigeria, we call it New General Mathematics. That's the general textbook that people use in 10th grade. However, if I want to be an engineer, or if I want to go into something with STEM emphasis, then you can take additional mathematics or further mathematics. Let's look at the table of contents for further mathematics in Singapore, which is very similar to the model that Nigeria uses. Here we go. In 10th grade, while you're doing your regular math, you can also do additional math at the same time. It's like doing multiple math classes at the same time. And the research shows that there's actually a benefit to learning different types of math. Sorry about that in the background. Okay, so here we go. Quadratic functions, equations and inequalities, radicals, they call it surds, but it's radicals in America. Polynomials and partial fractions. This is in 10th grade, okay? Exponential and logarithmic functions, no problem. Binomial theorem, coordinate geometry, circles, all of this is pretty standard. Applications of straight line graphs, trigonometric functions, trigonometric identities and equations. This is in 10th grade, so notice that they've already got it into pre-calculus. They have pre-calculus now happening. But this is where it gets really interesting. In 10th grade, in the second book that they use for 10th grade, this is where Singapore just hits the ball out of the park. Chapter 12, differentiation. Tangents, normals, and rates of change, maxima and minima, differentiation of trigonometric, exponential, and logarithmic functions, integration, applications of integration, kinematics, and then they end with plane geometry. What happened in this book? They started doing calculus. In 10th grade in Singapore, if you are going in that direction of wanting that extra math, you're doing calculus. This is part of why we have the Counting to Calculus book that we're emphasizing to families. Because in Counting to Calculus, students can learn calculus when they're ready. And so I'm ready to work with families to implement more of the Counting to Calculus framework. And we have this book available on our website, amosthemathguy.com, or you can email amosthemathguy@gmail.com. My Counting to Calculus framework uses this book as a main text. And the idea is that no matter who you are, no matter where you're at, we've removed duplication and we can help you to learn math efficiently. You can learn math efficiently. You can learn math like Singapore is learning, but even do better. Why? Because we teach the history of math and the applications of math. That's very important. It's good to know the why. Why am I learning this, right? One of the applications of mathematics as it relates to calculus, for example, has to do with the motion of planets around the sun. This was part of why Newton did the work that he did. Sir Isaac Newton was at Cambridge from 1661 to 1665, and one of the things that happened during that time was that he had opportunities to think about these different issues, right? They had a plague that happened, and so he was back, away from campus for part of that time. And Newton was able to come up with some great ideas that, of course, were verified and confirmed over time. But he wanted to understand why the planets were going around the sun. And so in trying to understand why the planets go around the sun, Sir Isaac Newton comes up with these methods and techniques and tools, right? Of course, he had read the work of René Descartes, the French mathematician. Blaise Pascal had lived around that time as well. Pierre de Fermat had lived before him as well. These guys laid the groundwork for Newton. So when Newton came, he had a lot of things going for him, and he was able to go forward from there. Galileo and Kepler and Copernicus had already set the stage for him as well. And so that's part of why he talks about standing on the shoulders of giants. He was quoting somebody else, but he himself was saying he stood on the shoulders of some giants, people like Galileo. So it's important to see the applications of calculus. There was a point. The point was to understand the motion of the planets. This is why we need to teach physics, chemistry, math together, and engineering, because people can see the applications of what they're learning. Otherwise, it becomes a chore. Why am I doing this, right? And so I believe strongly in math fluency, but I also believe in teaching the applications and the history of the concept so that students have the context for what they're learning, which could then hopefully inspire them to put in the effort to become very good at math. That's the approach we take in the Counting to Calculus framework. Get everyone to calculus efficiently. No matter what textbook you're using at your school, this is a great supplement to help you keep learning math towards calculus. And then once you get to calculus, you can decide what you want to do with your life. If you want to do more math, you could go into Calc 2. But if you want to take a step back and go into a different field, no problem at all. But that's the approach that I believe is very effective. Let's teach the applications of math. Let's teach the integrative nature of math like Singapore does. Let me know if you have any questions, but I believe this is why Singapore is way better than many countries, especially America, when it comes to mathematics. Let me know if you have any questions. This is Amos the Math Guy. Please feel free to subscribe, like, and share with your friends. We'll be talking a lot more about math strategies in our Counting to Calculus Club, in the programs I'm doing for professional development and teacher training. So if your school would like me to share some of these resources, I would love to share strategies and tools to inspire teachers as they seek to inspire the next generation of students. AmosTheMathGuy@gmail.com or AmosTheMathGuy.com. Take care. Have a blessed day.